All right, so you want to know how to build a great company,
Not just good, right?
right? Not just good, great. And I bet you want to actually be able to use the advice.
Practical stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we're diving deep into Good to Great, the book by Jim Collins.
Ah, classic.
Yeah, his team spent 5 years analyzing companies that made the jump from good to great results. And we're going to break it all down for you.
You know, what's really interesting about this research is it's not about companies that were always amazing.
Right.
It's about those that were, average, maybe even struggling.
And then, bam,
Exactly. Suddenly they take off, way outperforming everyone else.
that's what makes it so useful for us. This isn't just for born lucky companies. It means any company could do this.
Totally. And get this, a lot of these companies, they weren't in hot industries.
Really?
Some were in the bottom 5% of their industries while they were transforming.
So it's not just being in the right place at the right time.
No, it's something about the company itself.
Okay, so what was it they did that was so different?
Well, first thing Collins noticed was a pattern in their leaders. He called it level 5 leadership.
Okay, what's that mean?
These leaders are ambitious, sure, but not for themselves. Their ambition is all about the company succeeding.
Interesting. So not the typical, like, super charismatic CEO we always hear about.
Not always, no. Take Coleman Mockler. He was CEO of Gillette back when they were facing hostile takeovers. Left and right, people wanted to buy them out.
Ah, yeah.
But Mockler, he fought hard to protect the company. And not because he'd get rich. He could have walked away with millions.
Wow.
He truly believed it was the best thing for Gillette long term. For the company, for the employees, for everyone.
Sounds like he put the company first, before himself even.
He absolutely did. And sadly, he died of a heart attack not long after all this was publicly recognized.
Oh, wow.
Really shows you these level 5 leaders, they're different. They put the company above all else. It's the opposite of leaders who just want fame or quick profits for themselves.
Do you have an example of a leader like that, focused on themselves?
Yeah, Stanley Galt, he ran Rubbermaid in the 80s.
Okay.
Charismatic guy, got great results, but it was more about his brand, his reputation. When he left, Rubbermaid couldn't keep it up.
Interesting. So it's like level 5 leaders are playing the long game, not just going for the quick win.
Precisely. And that long-term thinking, it shows up in another big principle. First to, then what?
First to, then what? What's that all about?
These companies got the right people on the bus before they even figured out where they were driving.
You're kidding. So they focused on the team first.
Absolutely. It's like they thought, if we have the best people, we can figure out anything.
So it's more about building a team you can trust that can handle whatever comes their way.
Exactly. Not just a bunch of brilliant individuals, but people who fit the culture, share the values.
How they find those people? Were they, like, offering crazy salaries and perks?
That's the thing. No, the research showed there was no connection between executive pay and going from good to great. It wasn't about motivating with money. It was about creating the right environment where the right people would just thrive.
Gotcha. Do you have an example of a company that did this first two thing well?
Oh, definitely. Wells Fargo. Their old CEO, Dick Cooley, was famous for hiring talent.
What did he do?
He built up this deep pool of future leaders. So many of them went on to become CEOs at other big companies. He wasn't just building a team for Wells Fargo, he was building a team for the whole industry.
Wow, that's incredible. So when things changed in the industry, they were ready.
Exactly. When banking got deregulated, Wells Fargo adapted like it was nothing. Other banks were struggling, but they had the right people.
So we've got the right leader, the A-team. What's next?
Next comes facing reality. These companies, they were amazing at confronting the brutal facts of their situation, but they never lost faith.
So it's like being realistic but optimistic at the same time, balancing those two.
Exactly. This is where the Stockdale paradox comes in.
What's that?
It's named after Admiral Jim Stockdale. He was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
He saw that the prisoners who didn't make it were often the super optimists.
How so?
They'd keep saying, "We'll be home by Christmas." But Christmas would pass, and they'd lose hope.
Yeah, that makes sense. Setting yourself up for disappointment.
Stockdale, though, he believed he'd get out, but he never ignored how bad things were.
So how does this paradox apply to, like, running a business?
Look at Circuit City. Back in the 70s, they were almost bankrupt.
Yikes.
But their CEO, Alan Wurtzel, he didn't freak out. He looked at the facts and then tried a whole new retail model. He didn't pretend things were fine, but he believed they could turn it around.
So it's about having the courage to see the problems, but then focusing on the solutions.
Exactly. And it's not just the leader thinking this way. The whole company needs to be able to speak openly and honestly.
So no more sweeping problems under the rug. Got it.
Yeah.
But how do you create that kind of openness?
Leaders have to ask questions, not just give answers. They create safe spaces for people to disagree.
And when things go wrong, they do those autopsies you talked about.
Yes. But not to blame anyone. It's about learning why something failed.
No blame autopsies. I like it. Okay, so we've got the right leadership, the A-team, facing reality, and open communication. What else?
Now comes the hedgehog concept. This one's about figuring out 3 key things. What your company can be the best in the world at, what really drives your profits, and what your people are truly passionate about.
So it's not just about like setting any old ambitious goal. It's about finding what you have the potential to be great at.
Exactly. It takes a lot of soul searching to find this. You have to let go of things that are good but not great.
Give us an example of a company that really found their hedgehog.
Abbott Laboratories is a good one. They realized they couldn't be the absolute best overall pharmaceutical company.
But they could be the best at something more specific.
Yes. They saw they could excel at making affordable healthcare products.
Smart move.
This led them to become leaders in hospital nutrition and diagnostic tools. It's about focusing on your true strength.
So many companies probably spread themselves too thin, doing things they're okay at, instead of finding their one great thing.
It's tough. It takes discipline. And speaking of discipline, that's our next principle, a culture of discipline.
Ooh, discipline. Sounds intense.
Yeah.
Was it like a super strict environment at these companies?
Not at all. It wasn't about a ton of rules. It was about self-disciplined people who could be trusted to do the right thing.
Okay, I think I get it, but can you give me an example, maybe an analogy?
Think of Dave Scott. He won the Ironman triathlon 6 times.
Wow, impressive.
Now, this guy was already an elite athlete, but he was known for rinsing his cottage cheese to get rid of extra fat.
Wait, really?
Yep, he was already burning tons of calories. He didn't need to do that. But it showed his discipline, his dedication to doing everything right, even the little things.
I love that. It's not about being perfect. It's about always striving for excellence.
Yeah.
Even when no one's watching.
You got it. And this culture of discipline showed up in how these companies responded to tough times. Remember Wells Fargo and deregulation?
Yeah, they did great.
They cut perks for executives, focused on being efficient, that whole rinse your own cottage cheese attitude.
While other companies were like living it up.
Exactly. Their results show the difference discipline makes. It's not just about what individuals do, it's the whole company culture.
Okay, discipline, I'm getting it. So what about technology? I bet these good to great companies were always chasing the latest gadgets.
You'd think so, right? But nope. They saw tech as a tool to help them go faster, not the main reason for their success.
So they were careful about which technologies to use.
Absolutely. They only picked technologies that fit their hedgehog concept. They weren't just trying to be trendy.
They were smart about it. Any examples come to mind?
Think about Walgreens. When the internet was taking off, a lot of those .com companies made fun of Walgreens for being slow to get online.
Oh, I remember that.
But Walgreens, they waited and figured out how to make the internet work for them.
And it paid off.
Big time. While those .coms were crashing and burning, Walgreens kept growing. They used tech to their advantage, not the other way around.
So it's like technology is a tool, not the solution itself. You have to use it wisely.
Exactly. And that leads us to our last concept for today, the flywheel effect. Building a great company is like pushing a giant flywheel. It's heavy at first, progress is slow.
You're really working hard, but it feels like nothing's happening.
Yep. But with each push, you get a little more momentum, and eventually that wheel starts spinning on its own.
So there's no magic moment. It's a gradual process.
Precisely. It's all these principles working together. You have the right leader, the right people, you're disciplined, you're focused on your hedgehog, and you just keep pushing, turn by turn until you break through. It's all about that long game building up slowly over time.
Yeah, this flywheel effect is really making me think. It's not just companies, right? It feels like this applies to anything you want to achieve, like personal goals, creative projects, anything.
I think you're right. What's so cool about these principles is that they do seem to work in different areas of life.
So how would you actually build a personal flywheel? Where do you even start with that?
Just like with those companies, it starts with figuring out your own personal hedgehog concept,
Finding your strengths and passions and all that.
Yeah. What really lights you up? What are you naturally good at? And how can you connect those things to something that creates value? Maybe for yourself, maybe for others. It doesn't matter.
So it's like finding that overlap between what you're good at, what you love, and what can make a difference in the world.
Exactly. It's that sweet spot where your talents and passions line up with a real chance to have an impact. And just like those companies had to be honest about what they couldn't be the best at, we got to be honest with ourselves too.
You mean about things we're holding on to that might actually be holding us back?
Exactly. We might be good at something, but could we be great at it? That self-awareness is key to building a personal flywheel that'll actually move you forward. Then, once you have a better idea of your personal hedgehog, you got to get the right people around you.
So it's like building your own dream team, just like those companies focused on first who, then what.
Yep. Find people who share your values, push you to grow, and will have your back through thick and thin. Think of it like your own personal board of advisors, your own support system of cheerleaders and accountability partners.
That sounds great,
Yeah.
but how do you find those people?
Mm.
It's easy to say surround yourself with the right people, but actually doing it, that's tougher.
It definitely takes work. Think about people you admire, who inspire you or challenge you to be your best self. Then be proactive about connecting with people like that.
So it's about being intentional with the relationships you build, finding people who can help you grow and reach your goals.
Exactly. And once you've got your team, whether it's a few close friends or a whole network of mentors and collaborators, it's all about consistent action, pushing that flywheel one step at a time.
So you've got your personal hedgehog concept and your dream team. Now what? How do you actually start getting that flywheel spinning?
This is where that discipline comes in. Remember Dave Scott rinsing his cottage cheese? It was about those little consistent actions that add up to something big over time. Gotta apply that to our own lives too.
So it's about showing up every day, doing the work, even when you don't feel like it, building those habits that lead to bigger results down the line.
Exactly. Be consistent, even when progress feels slow. And remember the Stockdale paradox. Face those brutal facts without losing sight of what you can achieve.
Speaking of brutal facts, that's something I struggle with. Sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed by challenges and setbacks, and you start doubting yourself, doubting if you can actually reach your goals. How do you stay motivated and keep going when it gets tough?
That's a great question, and we all go through it. One thing that helped those good to great companies was doing those autopsies when things went wrong.
But you said they weren't about blaming people, they were about learning from mistakes.
Right. Got to apply that to our own lives, too.
Yeah.
When we hit setbacks, instead of getting down on ourselves, we can ask, what did I learn? How can I grow from this experience? It's about turning those challenges into opportunities.
So you're saying change your perspective.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking I failed, think this is a chance to learn and do better next time.
Yes. And be kind to yourself. Setbacks happen. They're part of the journey. Often those setbacks are the very things that help us get back on track and do even greater things than we thought we could.
This is making me think about technology and how we use it.
Yeah.
We talked about how good to great companies used it as a tool, not the main driver.
Mm-hmm.
How can we apply that to our own personal flywheels?
We got to be aware of how we use tech. It's so easy to get sucked into social media, emails, notifications.
It's like there's always something trying to grab your attention. It's hard to stay focused on what matters most.
It is. So be intentional about your tech choices. Are these tools helping you be more productive, more creative, more connected to what matters? Or are they just distractions, wasting your time and stressing you out?
It's like creating a technology diet for yourself, choosing what's good for you and avoiding what's not.
Love that analogy. And just like those good to great companies, we're always checking in and making adjustments. We got to do that with our tech habits too. Regularly see how you're using tech and change things up if it's not working.
So it's not about rejecting all technology. It's about using it wisely and making sure it helps you reach your goals.
Exactly. Tech is a tool, and it's up to us to use it for good.
You know, through all this talk about good to great, I keep thinking about how building a great company, a fulfilling career, a meaningful life, it's not about some secret formula or overnight success. It's about embracing the whole journey, the ups and downs, the struggles, the wins.
That's so true. And that journey is just as important as the destination. It's in those tough moments, the setbacks, the doubts, that we learn the most about ourselves, how resilient we are, how much we can grow.
And then when you have those wins, those breakthroughs, those I did it moments,
Yeah.
that's when you really feel the joy of the journey.
Absolutely. And that joy, that feeling of accomplishment, that's what keeps you going, pushes you to keep growing, to reach even higher.
This whole deep dive into good to great and built to last has been amazing.
Yeah.
I feel so inspired, like there are so many possibilities, and I have a much better understanding of what it takes to really succeed, both personally and professionally.
That's fantastic to hear. As we wrap up, I want to challenge everyone listening. How can you build your own flywheel? How can you use these ideas to find success, purpose, and make a real impact?
Such a good question. And that's exactly what we'll talk about in the last part of our deep dive, where we'll turn all this amazing info into actionable steps you can start using today. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've talked level 5 leaders, flywheel effects, the whole 9 yards. Now let's make it practical. What can we actually do with all this?
You hit it right on the head. These principles aren't just for companies, they're for anything you want to achieve in life.
So true. Whether it's your career, a personal project, whatever, it all starts with that hedgehog concept. Figuring out your passions, your talents, and how to make a difference. But how do we get from knowing it to actually doing it? Building that flywheel and getting it to spin.
It's all about taking those first steps. And sometimes those first steps are tough. Like, think back to the flywheel analogy. You're pushing this giant, heavy wheel.
And it feels like nothing is happening.
Right. That's where most people give up.
I know, I would be tempted to. You don't see results right away. You start to wonder, am I doing this wrong? Is it even worth it?
But here's the key. Those early pushes, even if they seem small, they matter. They're setting you up for success later on. Every time you do something, you add a little more energy to the wheel.
So even when it seems like nothing's happening, you have to trust that it is working, that you're building something important.
Exactly. And that's where discipline comes in. Remember Dave Scott rinsing his cottage cheese? It was about those small actions, repeated over time, adding up to huge results. We've got to do that too.
So we find the things that align with our hedgehog, even if they seem small, and we do them consistently, even when we don't feel like it.
You got it. It's about building those good habits, creating systems to help you, and surrounding yourself with people who lift you up.
What about when things go wrong, though? When you hit a roadblock and feel like giving up? I know I struggle with that.
That's when the Stockdale paradox is most important. You gotta have faith you'll succeed, but also face the reality of where you're at.
So, see the challenges, the problems, but don't let them take over.
Right. And use those setbacks to learn and grow. Remember, the good to great companies, they did autopsies when things went wrong.
But not to blame anyone, just to figure out what happened.
Exactly.
Right?
We got to apply that to ourselves too. When things don't go as planned, instead of getting discouraged, ask, what can I learn from this? How can I get better because of it?
Turn those failures into lessons.
Yes. And be kind to yourself in the process. Everyone messes up. A lot of times, those mistakes are what help you get back on track and end up doing even better than you thought you could.
This makes me think about tech again. We talked about how good to great companies used it wisely, as a tool, not the main event. How can we do that in our own lives?
Pay attention to how you're using tech. It's so easy to get lost in social media, emails, all those notifications.
It's true. So many distractions, it's hard to stay focused on what matters.
I know, right? So ask yourself, is this tech helping me be more productive, more creative, more connected to the important stuff? Or is it just wasting my time and stressing me out?
Like going on a tech diet, only consume the good stuff.
Exactly. And just like those companies were always checking in and making changes, we got to do that with our tech habits. Regularly take stock, is this working for me? If not, change it up.
So, not about being anti-technology, but using it in a way that supports our goals, not distracts from them.
You got it. Tech is a tool, and it's up to us to use it the right way.
Thinking back on all this, it's clear that building anything great, a company, a career, even just a good life, it's not about some magic trick or getting lucky. It's about the journey, the good and the bad, the struggles and the wins. It's about that flywheel, knowing that every effort you put in gets you closer to where you want to be.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And the journey, it matters just as much as the end result. It's when things are tough that you learn the most about yourself, how strong you are, how much you can grow.
And then when you do succeed, when you have those breakthroughs, that's when it all feels worth it.
You know it. That feeling is what keeps you going, pushes you to do more, to be better.
This deep dive into good to great and built to last has been amazing. I feel so much more prepared to really go after what I want, and I have a bunch of new ideas to try.
That's what we love to hear. And remember, folks, greatness doesn't happen overnight. It's about finding your hedgehog, building that flywheel, and pushing it with everything you've got.
So well said. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure. And to everyone listening, keep pushing those flywheels. You got this.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something fascinating. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for greatness.